Hello everyone, I'm Lydia Ruth. Welcome to Romance. And while you're listening today, I hope that you will click the link in the description box on the YouTube channel just below the video and go to the page on my blog where I have embedded this so that you can see the pictures and the links that I have mentioned and maybe look around the area. And also I want to thank you all for coming. It's such a privilege. Things are so much better than they used to be in many ways. A lady could hardly get a message out unless she went to a great production of producing a newsletter and spending hours and hours stamping it and mailing it out by hand, or if we were ever invited to speak somewhere like at a homeschool meeting or a homemakers get together, or even a ladies' day for church ladies. You had to make so much adjustment preparation. You couldn't take all of your little children. You had to leave your home. Other people had to leave their home to come to these events. And now you can make yourself a nice cup of tea, whatever you like, and come and sit in your own house and look into mine. And it's just so comfortable and so convenient. And you're going to get the same message that many people spent hours trying to get a group together. And so it's also, you can walk out and I won't even notice if you get offended. Today, before I begin, I want to share my cup with you. I got it at Home Goods some time ago. Most of these cups are no more than $6, and the boxes of tea around here are going down to about $5. This is from Grace's Teaware, which is a very prominent company in this area, and it's quite pretty, really. And the tea that I am trying today is by Twinings. It's called Peppermint Cheer. These are supposed to be holiday flavors, but I've noticed in some of the discount stores there's boxes and boxes of peppermint cheer and spiced type of teas. This is completely caffeine free, and it really smells good when I make it in the cup. And even if I don't get around to drinking it or don't like it, it has a vanilla bean and peppermint in it, and it's amazing how nice that is in the home. And it's called Twinings Peppermint Cheer. You can get it online, or you can go to one of your discount grocery stores. So find a place for that. And before you get started today, ladies, please remember to make a list for yourself. In fact, I was reading one of those links that I gave you the last time I came here. I gave you some Pinterest links on homemaking that I quite like, because some of these ladies put together such pretty visuals to go with it to just inspire you so much. We didn't have that, back in the day, and now we have it, and we should be happy. And we should be happy at home. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the accomplishment of even just staying home and managing it. And I want you to go to that link because it talked several times about planning your day, and how the night before one of the articles was you had to rid your mind of all the things that were on it to keep you from sleeping, because of whirling thoughts and the thoughts of things that didn't get done, by making a list, and that sort of empties your mind and gives you a chance for perfect rest. So while I was reading that, I thought about all the times that I couldn't sleep at night, and I noticed that you could make these little sleep sacks or little pillows out of herbs. And some of these teas, some of the herbs were the very same thing that are in these tea bags. So you could open these up and put them in something that maybe wouldn't stain your pillow, and stick them slightly under your pillowcase where you would be smelling them, and experiment and see if you have better dreams, or see if you have a better night, or you relax better. And they come from the olden days. Back in the Victorian days, they had these little sleep sacks, and they would put hops and lavender and rose petals and things like that in it. Some of these things I don't care for the smell of them, but I do like the mint and the vanilla. anything that makes you happy. And I'm the same way with foods or anything that is supposed to be so good for you, even bath scents and house scents, and even though they're very herbal, organic things for the home that are non-toxic and they're natural, they're not made out of any chemicals. If I don't like the scent, it's not going to calm me, and it's not going to motivate me. And it's the same with anything that I eat or drink. That's supposed to be, it'll have all these ingredients that are supposed to be so beneficial. If I don't like them, I feel like they just negative the whole thing out. And it's the same with, I think, anybody's appetite. If you don't like the smell and you don't like the taste of something, I don't think it's going to do that much good. And so today I also want to read from this Wives and Daughters, because I've been talking more about some of it's an ordinary story, Elizabeth Gaskell said, and it helps a lot to understand it because of the way life works in the home. Once you start staying home and you start homeschooling, this whole generation kind of comes back, and you see the same reactions as you would have in your home. That those of you who grew up in institutions, we find not much variance to things, but when these videos came out, I started to recognize our own feelings and our own behaviors and our own habits, which we developed at home because we were home. And there are so many benefits to being home that I decided to start a blog on it and later on do videos. I want to read what I did mention last time before we got started. Important to make a list, and please pray that if you're having an area in your home or in your life or in just being content or organized, or even if you need maybe more to make you content, if you just put all that list to prayer, and it helps a lot. And also to make sure that when you get up in the morning you bathe and you fix yourself up, because this is the most important job. You are a queen presiding beautifully over a place that's all your very own. If you remember when you first got married and the thrill of getting your own things, you got your own dishes and you got your own, all the wedding gifts, you had them all on display, and then you got a picture album that showed the start of your new married life and your homemaking. You got your new cooking books, and you got so many things. If you can remember the thrill of that. And it's the same with when you had your first child. Remember the first time you did the laundry, or even the first time you did the laundry for your new husband, and folding his shirts and ironing them, and how it made you feel, starting to establish your own home, that this was your own stuff, this was your very own thing. And back in the day of, like, say, the 1930s and 40s, to listen to people that we knew describe their new life when they got out on their own, with their own home and their own families, it was more glorious to them because they weren't picking up after their little brothers and sisters, and they weren't doing grueling work at home for their parents. It was different. The motivation should be different when you have your own establishment. Now, it doesn't matter whether you actually own your place. Hopefully, all of us can get to that point where we own our own homes, because it does change the dynamics a little bit. Those of you who have rented and then owned notice that it makes such a difference. Ownership creates a different mindset. And so, while I am living in the manse, I often say, as was quoted in The Quiet Man, when Mary Kate said, "The house might belong to my brother, but what's in it is mine." So that's what I say about the manse. What's in it is mine. That's my real estate, but what's in it. I want to read a little bit out of Wives and Daughters as soon as you get ready. So you bathe, get dressed, fix your hair and face, look at yourself in the mirror, put on a clean apron, put your little notebook in the pocket. I get these with a little pin in them, and they just fit just right in the pocket of the apron. And that way you've got a place to, when you think of something as you're going through your house or your routine, you can write down a list or an idea, or remind that something needs, I'll be working around here. We're in the guest room here. And I'll be working around here and fixing it up and sweeping, and I'll realize that something needs to be fixed, or there's a scar on the wall that needs to be painted, and I have a little jar of paint. I can just go and do that, but I'll just write it down first. And I'll notice that some things need to be fixed. And that's what these little books are neat for, plus new ideas for stories for the descendants. And so you get that all ready. And also I think that the exercises that I mentioned are so good for you, because if you wake up confused, discouraged, some people do, you know, and you need to have some things you do that put you in a better frame of mind. And I do believe that the exercises that I have mentioned, the stretches, even breathing through your nose a few times when you feel a sense of anxiety. I'm always talking about fighting off anxiety, because it's all around us now, and we have forgotten the buffers, the things that used to help people be less anxious. They would sit still, they would read a book, they worked in their little scrapbooks, they had their knitting and their sewing, and I'm talking about women in general. Then the men had their whittling, they had their downtimes too. We had our radio that we listened to, or we listened to other people talking or singing. And Jane Austen indeed wrote her stories for her family, and she got a lot of her ideas just listening to the people that came to visit her minister father, just listening to some of the things that were transpiring in their lives and writing stories about them. So do get some things done for yourself, and things that will benefit you. We are not good at that, are we, ladies? We think we have to be working all the time as though we were working for a factory. And take regular rest breaks, but also stimulate your mind with good things and good work. And what is it that makes you let your mind lie fallow and travel to things that cheer you up when you think about them? I know I've got several things cut out that I want to sew, and I always feel a little bit of a good endorphin lift when I'm thinking of that sewing project that I'd like to get to. That eventually that motivates me to get that kitchen cleaned up and go and sit down in there when I have a little time and sew. Let me see if there's anything else. Go for a walk. And I was reading about breathing the other day and remembering that our parents and grandparents, do you remember? You know, they weren't great scientists, and they didn't know all the details of every part of the body and how it functioned. But they used to tell us to breathe with our mouth closed and not to walk around with our mouth open. Now, why would they do that? Well, they knew several things, probably passed down from their parents. Number one is you're more likely to get a dry mouth and a sore throat if you breathe through your mouth, because there are not the same kind of filters, and you can't filter all the bacteria through your mouth that you can through your nose. So if you breathe in and out several times through your nose, people have made whole websites on this for health and exercise for you, to practice breathing through your nose. And they also thought that it made you look less intelligent if you walked around with your mouth open. So practice that for a while. If I had you here in my little school and you were my kids, I would teach you so much, and I would take you through these little exercises that I do. Also, half an hour before the sunrise, there's a blue light outside. See if this helps. Go out and stand in it. Take your cup of tea with you. Take your little phone with you and take a picture of it. And over time, you can maybe report to yourself in your diary the effect it might have on you. There's all kinds of free stuff around here if we would only do it. If I could ever learn to use my little phone that my grandchild bought me, and he even made a video for me on how to use your pink phone, your pink camera. He bought me a little video camera so that I could do a walk and talk or live streaming, or just not be having to stay in front of my laptop in a certain section. And I haven't even had time to sit down and watch the video and read the instructions. That's my whole problem. One time I got a new sewing machine, and it was a serger. And do you know, I was just too busy to read the instructions or even watch the video that came with it, and I just stayed with my old one, and so I don't adjust very well to new things. And so I want to also remind you to take care of yourself. You get up, you pray, and also read the scriptures, sing a song. Sing a song. All these have a great effect on your motivation and on your feeling of well-being. And like I said, if I had you here, if I had my children here again, this is what we would do, and I would have them spend adequate time in the bathroom. Last time I talked about bringing back the dressing table. So ladies would have a little time to sit still and consider their ways, consider themselves, look at themselves in the looking glass, and make sure that they don't look too critical, and that their eyes are not too hardened. And sometimes you'll notice maybe you've had too much talk of the world, and you'll notice a difference in your countenance because of it. So to get your day started, you are going to, some of you who are not good sleepers and you wake up really early, you have a better chance at this than others who sleep later, because there won't be anyone else up to interfere with all the things you want to do, your reading, your writing. And I listed several things that I have found over the years that every homemaker could benefit from. The knowledge of things you can look for knowledge on. And one would be find knowledge on homemaking. That's why I include the links that I do. So you can go to Pinterest and look at some of these ladies that do such an excellent job on homemaking. Another would be hospitality, and different ways to provide hospitality, maybe without having to have speed cleaning or turn your house upside down, or just simple little things you can do. Even a portable hospitality where you give something to someone so they can provide a cup of tea for themselves. And also there was the tea time. Having that tea time ceremony every day in your house just makes such a big difference, and you don't have to have much there. I have a little keto dessert that I like to make that's just a cashew butter combined with an egg and other things. As you bake it and keep those, they're high protein, and keep those nearby for your afternoon tea. And I think a family, even a homeschool family, they get so busy and life gets so interesting that they forget to stop and sit down. And some of us live in places where there are no coffee shops, tea rooms, or places to go, and you need to have a little corner in your house where you can go and just maybe pretend you're somewhere else. To decorate that little corner and the table, and have a place where you can sit down. And then there was the there was feminine dress. I thought that that was an important part of a woman's role in life, and I think that goes into choosing and sewing and creating ways to dress more girlish and femininely. And so those were just a few things that I had listed. Art, literature, and music, those were very important. I learned that from the homeschool experience. I knew nothing about this art, literature, and music, but it just opened up a whole new world for me as we went back into some of these books. And this book is good because it's called An Ordinary Story. And all these things that she writes about are common to all of us today, even though it was written in the 1800s. And I talked to you last time about Molly and being a 10-year-old girl and the embarrassment. She said she just wished people would stop bothering her, just leave her alone and forget about her. But they made remarks, and there was Mr. Cumnor, Lord Cumnor, who had hosted this party for the village children, and how when she came into the room they thought she was French, and tried to speak to her in French, and she says, "I don't know French, I'm only Molly Gibson." "Ah, the doctor's daughter," they said. And this is the DVD set you can get about this. And so this Mr. Cumnor, there was so much. This is where manners comes in, and that was another thing on the list that I thought was important. Where manners comes in, you pretty much have it made in life, even if you can't get a job, because good manners get you so far in life. And this Mr. Cumnor, he obviously wasn't used to being tactful. And tact is one of the things that we still need to learn today. And he would say things that were quite outrageous. And he said, "I know all about you, little woman, who's been sleeping in my bed." And then he kept referring to Sleeping Beauty and Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And she'd never read any of these stories, but she had fallen asleep on the lady, Miss Clare. She had been the nanny or a teacher at a school, and was considered, one of the members of that household. But he kept teasing her because already rumors had been spread by the servants and other people that there was a little girl sleeping in Miss Clare's bed. She's taking a nap. She'd gotten tired and fallen asleep. And this is really sensitive, to have little rumors spread about you and jokes spread about you. And we've all been through it, haven't we, those of us who are vital? And sometimes you have to set people straight. And what I do is I say, okay, these are my goals. What do I want the stereotype of me to be like? Someone who's serious about her role, who wants to be a keeper at home, and I would like for my husband and children to say when someone asks about me is that she's very dedicated to her home and she's creative. She likes to sew. And that would be enough. That would be all. Instead of saying things like, well, she's quite a character. She's very independent. And I wonder about that word, independence. You hear that sometimes when people describe other people. I think they should just leave that alone. That's a social judgment. Just leave it alone and find out how the person wants to be portrayed and not go around saying something about them. For instance, what I would say about Mr. S is he's very dedicated. That's all I need to say. I don't really need to say, well, he has a hobby and he does this and he jumps to conclusions. He doesn't, but people tend to. There are all these little therapists running around and analyzing people. And so right away, a rumor was spread about Molly, and she said, I want them just to leave. She thought to herself, I just want them to leave me alone. And so pretty soon her father came to pick her up from this party. And I forget who said this. I'd have to look back further. It was a character they didn't include in the movie. And she said, darling, your papa has finally come for you. And this is from I'm trying to think which chapter this is. It's in the beginning of the book when she's still 10 years old. So it's chapter 2. And you can listen to this on LibriVox. I left a link several videos ago where you can listen to this. And I also left links for where you can go and listen and watch the videos free online or listen to them. Do you know, darling, your papa has come for you and brought your pony for you to ride home. So I shall lose my little bedfellow for I suppose you must go. Go? Was there a question of it in Molly's mind? And she stood up, quivering, sparkling, almost crying out loud. She was brought to her senses, though, by Mrs. Kirkpatrick's next words. You must go and wish Lady Cumnor good night, you know, my dear, and thank her ladyship for her kindness to you. She is there near the statue talking to Mr. Courtenay. And, you know, of course, when you're really young people forever bossing you, it's always was a surprise to me when I got older and people were treating me like a normal adult. You've been bossed all of your life. Go and tell this lady thank you. Go and tell this lady please. Go and do this. And that's why I kept my children near me. When they were with me anywhere, they were sitting beside me in any social circle, in any commercial area, whatever. My children were never told, go and take this and put it over there in a store, or go and get up and go and do this. I always kept them near to me because I noticed how easy it was for other people to boss my children and make them feel miserable as children. But this is an interesting thing here. Like I said, tact needs to be learned and in the home. We have to be very careful what we say to people about what we're doing. And this woman said, your father has brought your pony for you to ride home, so I shall lose my little bedfellow, for I suppose you must go. Well, a Victorian never would have said that. If they did say it, it was quite outrageous. As a matter of fact, you wouldn't refer to anything that was done in personal or in private areas. You wouldn't refer to someone's bath or bathroom, or as a matter of fact, I read in an old book, and I think it was Mr. Eric Sloane. Remember, I read the weather books to you that he written in the 1930s and were published in the 1940s, and there was one manners book, and it was Manners of Old Times. And he said a man would never say to a woman, please be seated, or have a seat, because you would never refer to a woman's anatomy like that. You would say, have a chair, pull up a chair. I don't know what else they would say, but they would not refer to that, and it was considered quite risque. And so he was quite tactless in saying this. And then, of course, she's being bossed. And, you know, if you're 10, you remember these things. You remember just the nervousness of being around people telling you one thing after another. I think we should be better off, keep your children near us. And also, if you're homeschooling, then you know that a bunch of people in a classroom aren't also humiliating them and bossing them, and they're not subjected to other people's rules all the time. They'll learn well enough by your side and in peace and quiet. There'll be less cortisol, less nervousness in the next generation if the mother would be free to raise her children on her lap and sitting beside her and at her elbow. And she'll learn along with the children. You might think you're not qualified, but you become qualified when you have that responsibility. So let's continue with this story of Molly. And this lady wanted her to go and say goodbye to someone. You must go and wish Lady Cumnor good night, you know, and thank her ladyship for your kindness to you. What a thing to do. And there's nothing new. People are always pushing children around and telling them what to do. Let's just let the parents take care of all this. And parents, be careful not to subject your children to all kinds of public things they're not familiar with and other people that they don't know. Don't make them say things to other people that they don't know. And you know, children naturally recoil. Even a little child, a baby still, that someone wants to reach out and touch this baby or get real close to it, you can feel that baby cringe and get closer and closer to you. They have a natural instinct for people that they don't feel comfortable with. They recoil. And Molly said back, "Must I go?" in the most pitiful and pleading voice possible. "Yes, and make haste about it. There's nothing so formidable in it, is there?" replied Mrs. Kirkpatrick in a sharper voice than before, aware that they were wanting her at the piano and anxious to get the business in hand done as soon as possible. Now that was, Mrs. Kirkpatrick was the widow who eventually married Mr. Gibson, Molly's father. And so right away, Molly is sensing something quite unfeeling about this woman. In fact, when she was crying because her father was going to be married to Mrs. Kirkpatrick, Roger asked her why, and she said, "Well, I don't think she cares much for other people. She once left me in her room to take a nap, and then she forgot all about me." And she remembered, that humiliating time. And so she's already sensing it. She's only, 10 years old at this time. Molly stood still for a minute, and then, looking up, she said softly, "Would you mind coming with me, please?" "No, not I," said Mrs. Kirkpatrick, seeing that her compliance was likely to be the most speedy way of getting through the affair. So she took Molly's hand, and on the way, and passing the group at the piano, she said, smiling in her pretty genteel manner, "Our little friend here is shy and modest. How many times has people intimidated children by calling them shy? And God loves the quiet and gentle spirit just as much as he likes the person who is friendly and outgoing. And how many times the shy and quiet person is put down and told they need to have some kind of special therapy because of it. That's very dangerous, Let the shy be shy, and they will stay close to you and stay out of trouble if they're too shy." And so she didn't. Mrs. Kirkpatrick did not want to go with her to say all these nice things and say goodbye. "Our little friend here is shy and modest, and wants me to accompany her to Lady Cumnor to wish good night. Her father has come for her, and she is going away." Now, I would just say, when this happens to you and your child doesn't want to go, maybe walk past someone, and even in church, I always sat at one end, my husband sat at the other end, or one of the older children at the other end, and put the little ones in between. They don't like to sit next to other adults. They don't like to sit next to people that they don't know, and they have a sense about it. They just don't, because other people are authorities, and children sense that. And they'll watch every move that your child makes. And even at dinners and when I entertained or when I showed hospitality, my children sat next to me, on either side of me, and not next to the company if we could help it. Molly did not know how it was afterwards, but she pulled her hand out of Mrs. Kirkpatrick's. How many times do people grab other people's hands and they're reluctant, and children are so helpless and must be protected. She grabbed her hand out of Mrs. Kirkpatrick's on hearing these words, and going a step or two in advance, came up to Lady Cumnor, grand in purple velvet, and dropping a curtsy, said, "My lady, Papa is coming, and I'm going away, and my lady, I wish you good night, and thank you for your kindness." She got away from Mrs. Kirkpatrick as quick as she can, and many of us, even though we're not children, even us vital people, we recoil and shrink from bossy people. We recoil and shrink from critical people, or for people who want to analyze us and put us in a category of a type of person. And I wish you good night and thank you for your kindness. She got out of there somehow. She believed afterwards, on thinking about it, that she had never bidden goodbye to Mrs. Kirkpatrick or all the rest of them, as she irreverently styled them in her thoughts. And so I just thought this little tedious little bit of description Mrs. Gaskell really felt that, didn't she? But you get things like this. See, I could see this in real life, and I could think back to my own life, and when you're 10 years old or 8 or whatever, and someone else is always looking after you, and you want to get away from them as quickly as possible. Not everybody and not all the time, but that's just some little fact of life. Now, I also wanted to read a little bit out of The Lost Art of Dress, because this is helping. And by the way, this is a video that you can listen to while you work, and if you don't want to stay the whole hour, you can always turn it off and go on to something else. This is just for people who want to, sort a box full of something, do a huge pile of dishes in the kitchen, clean the fridge, and even while you're sewing, or maybe you just want to sit and listen while you do something with your hands, maybe some handiwork, and listen. So this is a book about clothing for women, and it's a history book, and she harkens back to the early 1900s, late 1800s, and she talked about something called the flour sacking, and I don't have a sample of it here, but basically it was a cotton fabric, the kind I used to sew dresses with, and it was called calico, and it was a big sack or bag that they put flour in, and I'll show you how that happened. And when I was about 13, I was the same height as I am now. That was when I reached the height that I am now. I could actually get a blouse out of one of those bags, and whenever our parents brought home a big sack of flour, one of us would get dibs on that bag. I want that bag when it's empty. And because you could do so many different things with it, but you could get at least a blouse out of it. So let's talk about this. It says extension agents. Now, I don't know if you know what an extension agent was. There was someone that got a little stipend from, I don't know if it was from the state or the government or just a local contributions, to hire an extension agent to put on demonstrations and maybe even go and from house to people who wanted to know more about sewing and clothing and how to be thrifty. And so they're called extension agents, and they often put on programs where you could sew and come and show off what you made, or even have a contest. And I believe that they were the forerunner of the 4-H program. It says here, by the Depression, that would have been in the 1930s, extension agents demonstrated how to take the big cotton sacks that once held sugar, flour, and feed, wash them, dye them, and make attractive garments. As a matter of fact, you can get feed sack prints at the fabric stores, and they use them for making the pretty curtains and tablecloths for a certain look, a certain country look in a room. So they demonstrated how to take the big cotton sacks that once held sugar, flour, and feed, wash them, dye them, and make attractive garments for pennies. Poor farm women had been using sacks out of necessity long before the agents came along, but extension sack dress contests made the practice more appealing. This is what I've noticed about what people do, is that they will see a trend that's already going on, like what are the homemakers already doing, and they'll pick up on that and make it into a part of the culture, and they put it in the advertising, and then find out how it's done, and then just extend upon it. A lot of the things that we do, a lot of things that are done by designers were already being done by people before they became popular. Poor farm women had been using these flour sacks out of necessity long before the agents came along, but extension sack dress contests made the practice more appealing. One Louisiana mother declared that her daughter wasn't a bit ashamed to wear sack dresses now and then, and herself had made 4 of them. In 1933 alone, women in clothing clubs in Virginia made more than 10,000 garments out of sacks. You know, all you would do, they're already folded, there's already doubled, you just lay your pattern on top of it and cut it out. And I know that the sacks were big enough, the flour sacks were big enough in those days. I see them every now and then in some of our discount grocery stores, but they're real small. But they were large enough that you could make a woman's blouse, at least. In 1933 alone, women in clothing clubs in Virginia made more than 10,000 garments out of sacks. Eventually, the flour and feed companies figured out what women were up to. See, we create the culture, ladies. We at home create the culture. We even learned how to, at one time, make our own paint, or make wallpaper, or make glue to glue wallpaper on, and by boiling cornstarch and water and letting it cool. And we learned how to make our own ink. When people get wind of what we're already doing, well, then they get clever about producing more of it. Eventually, the flour and feed companies figured out what women were up to and began to compete for sales by using pretty prints in their feed sacks. Their dealers found it rather odd. One feed dealer recalled that women used to ask him only for a certain kind of chicken feed, but now they asked if he carried a feed for laying chickens in a flour percale. Percale is a type of cotton, and that's what our sheets are called. They're percale. He complained, "It ain't natural." Feed sacks made an important difference when the graduate students studying home economics at the University of Alabama learned that the Farm Security Administration, a New Deal agency, had made the alarming discovery that families in the Deep South had only about $7.52 per person per year to spend on clothing, and that was supposed to cover everything from shoes to school clothes to underwear in what would be $116 in today's dollars. This was at a time when the annual cost of ready-to-wear clothing for a teenage girl in San Francisco was pegged at $58.32, or $905 if bought today. We're going to get to a good part here. The teacher of the Alabama students had come to the university in 1929 to organize its work in textiles and clothing, and to help first-year college women plan their wardrobes. She had already noted how hard it was to guide the high school girl through the trying period when she is charmed by the alluring window displays, the persuasive arguments of advertisements, and the novelties and fads in magazines and shops. Fads were all the more dangerous to the girl with very little money. Thompson's graduate students decided to devise a homemade wardrobe for the high school girl that would fit into the $7.52 annual budget. Now, how much did I say that was in today's money? $116. Okay, so they knew there were precedents for that feat. So they ran thrifty dress competitions every year in their rural counties for more than a decade. At the start of the Great Depression, the winning entry at a dollar dress contest held in Virginia cost exactly 89 cents to make. Any woman that's why when I make a garment, sometimes I'll tell you how much a yard, I'll say how much the zipper cost, how much the thread cost, how much a yard with the fabric was, and how much the total cost of the dress was, including any kind of additional trims and embellishments I put on it, and I might even include the cost of the shoes, just to show you what you could do with $20 even still today. So they held a dollar dress contest held in Virginia Any woman who has ever looked in her overstuffed closet and moaned that she hasn't a thing to wear should be prepared to feel ashamed. The Alabama students made their goal to produce a 3-year wardrobe, since 3 years was the usual length of time home economists expected a garment to last. They thought it would be fair to say that their imaginary Southern girl did not have to buy all the sewing patterns with her own money. She could borrow some from the pattern lending library run by her church or school. Yeah, we borrowed patterns from each other too. Or many people knew how to sew without patterns just by tracing around another garment. They would limit themselves to blue as their basic color and use red and white for accents. All the different pieces would have to go together. So it describes all this stuff, and I wanted to make a comment about the allure of the stores and the shops and the things in the shops that charmed the average high school girl. I will tell you what that is, because I still remember and I still identify as 16. And that is when you grow up in a large family on a homestead and you don't have things at hand you don't have access to very much, and you're taught to be very practical, and denim is what you wear, and you have a flannel plaid shirt and denim and very sensible shoes and everything. Well, girls long for pretty, and they long for things that sparkle and they're attractive, and that's what attracts them. And even the poorest people cannot be practical. People used to criticize poor girls because if they did have some money, they'd go and buy some really unnecessary fancy buttons for sewing onto a garment, and or they would buy something that was totally impractical, like a pair of shoes that had a buckle on them, and the buckle had rhinestones. But the reason is this lack of prettiness and this longing for some relief from the practicality and the plainness of their existence. And so, like, she would buy, if she saw a fancy teacup, she'd rather buy that than a sturdy container that would last her for years. She'd rather have that, because this is part of where this taking care of yourself movement has come from recently, is that people who were caregivers were told that it has to be, you cannot take the time for your caregiving for yourself and just maybe clean a cupboard, because that's not real caregiving. It had to be something that's totally unnecessary and impractical, but fed your sense of relief. And so you find them using their time for reading a book, or writing a letter on some fancy stationery, or having a delicious cup of tea, or just anything that gives you an instant relaxation and relief. And this is where I remember growing up and hearing the poor criticized. Well, the reason they're poor is because they took their money and they bought this and this instead of buying something that would be lasting. But you have to understand the dynamics of poverty. If you only had $1, it wasn't going to buy you a nice couch or something that would last you a long, long time. So you might as well spend it on some lace and some things that would give you some instant, some ribbons and some things that would give you some instant joy. And or you buy some paints and a new paintbrush, or you buy just something that was pretty and something that you enjoyed. And it's hard for you to understand if you're not vital. Well, if you've been vital and you've been through any kind of poverty or national disasters where you're left with very little, you would understand it. You need brightness, you need color, you need luxury. We would buy cheap, perfume, or we would buy, if we had a chance to buy a watch, we would buy a pretty watch. We wouldn't buy a plain practical watch. And so we were very impractical, but that's the way it is. I used to wonder about that too when I was growing up. why would a person who was very poor, when she came into some money, go and spend it all at the hairdresser? Well, that gave her some kind of a sense of elevation and relief, and made her feel like feminine. And so let's think twice about it if we start criticizing people. I know there are some probably bad habits that you get from being poor, and that's probably why the prophet David said something like this in one of his prayers. Don't make me so poor that I am desperate, he said, nor so rich that I lack sympathy or love. And, just give me enough. Give me what I need. Now I'm going to read again from this mystery book about women working. And the reason I am is because we have a unique place in life here as women. I wish I had brought in the saying that someone sent me, that men and women are different, and that the men are to be the providers and need to be stable to be providers, but the women also help to secure that by keeping them encouraged. And I talked to you about quotes I had heard where a man was working, he's very driven in his job, and he enjoys it. Some men don't, but they just think of their wives and children and how dependent they are, and how precious they are to them, so they keep working, and keeps them encouraged. And I have heard of many of a Christian woman who kept her husband encouraged back in the day when you really couldn't go to work to, quote, help out, and all was dependent on the man. There was no state benefits, there was no government benefits, and how much the wife benefited her husband by being the homemaker, and it was like an investment to her. She took his money and she made it stretch, and she made it work, and she was creative with it. And she also was able to make good judgment about purchases and about things they could afford or couldn't afford. And she had very knowledgeable about what their payments were, and she wasn't careless with the money. And so she was able to, I guess, multiply the benefits. They created their own benefits in those days. And by being thrifty, clean, and tidy, and careful with things, they could benefit their husbands and make everything that he worked for worthwhile. They weren't careless with their possessions. They made sure things lasted. The men took care of their tools and didn't leave them out in the rain, or just toss them in the back of a truck without. They took care of them. They brought them in the winter, and they polished the handles and took the rust off of everything. And the women took care of everything too. She sewed buttons on and mended their clothes, because everything was considered an investment. So as a woman, you have to think of what you're doing in raising your children and teaching them at home as an investment. And I was talking to one of my sons the other day, and I thought, I wish I could interview him on here for you, because he was waxing so brilliant. And he said the reason that the women don't want to stay home is they're not valued as homemakers. They're not given incentive, and being mothers and homemakers, it's not held high in esteem. And so we have to start respecting that again. And but I don't think when I was growing up, you'd hear things like, well, you should stay home and be a homemaker for the good of that country, for the good of the economy, for the good of, you make your nation great, and for the good of the church, and for the good of this or that. But also, I think that they should have said, because you're wanted, you're needed, you're loved, and for love. And one of these books I'm reading will talk about how, I think I read it to you before, Peter Marshall in one of his sermons says, we hear about the smart woman, we hear about the sophisticated woman, we hear about the women who can write novels, or who hold down brilliant jobs, and we hear about the women who are pretty, But we don't hear much about the good woman, the kind woman, the woman that brings love to her family, protects her children, and even protects her husband. Did you know that you can even protect your husband from following false teachings and false doctrines and being sold things? And it's very important for you to guard your home and guard your family. You can even guard your husband so that he doesn't fall into things that aren't sound. And a lot of times men don't have time to study as much as we do and learn about some of the things that are going around in the world and things to avoid, and we can warn them. So here is what he says, this author says about harm in women working. Now, not all of you will agree with me, but he's writing from a Christian viewpoint. And men were not saying that women shouldn't work outside the home because they were trying to deprive them of anything. I watched a real interesting video. A young man was trying to talk to young women about modesty. And he said, I'm not trying to say that you should cover certain areas of your body because I'm trying to restrict you and be legalistic and deprive you of the joy of dressing the way you want to. But he described it as protection for yourself and protection for other people, to keep other people in their place too. And it was the same with working outside the home, that the men didn't want the women to work, their daughters to work, not because I heard one man say, well, I want my daughter to have all these experiences of working here and working there and everything. But back in the day, they did not want that because their daughters would be exposed to other people's authority. That's not right. And also they would her feet would not reside at home. And it's always the single girls that are lured out of the home. And where do the married women learn to work outside the home after they're married and after they have children? They learn to work at a very young age when they're single. And so it wasn't to harm them or deprive them of happiness and freedom. It was to protect them. And you look back at some of the things that they ridicule. People ridicule the Victorian era for. I remember reading a lot about how women were not permitted to read newspapers. And the more I studied it, the more I read Linda Lichter's book, Simple Social Graces, was that newspapers were considered scandalous rags because they were made out of rags. They're called yellow journalism because the rags were, it produced a yellow cloth. And it was full of sensationalism and created fear and worry and jumped up nerves. And women were so prized and so treasured that the men wanted them to have calmness and peace and happiness and joy and live in a luxurious type of way. They say a lot about how men aren't required to provide luxuries, but really the men in my life wanted their wives to have some luxuries. They wanted to show the fruit of their labor at home, to have some comforts, to have some things that would make life better and happier. So I wanted to read to you Harm in Women Working, what this man writes, because now that I've given you a background of why they thought it was harmful, it also was considered bad for I don't even think they knew about hormones, but they knew about women's seat of emotion and about their cycles and about their emotions. Women tend to, and people knew this before there was all this science and psychology going around, but people knew that women sensed danger more keenly and more quickly than a man would. They'd have a feeling about, like I talked to you about children and how they had a sense of recoiling from different things, and how this has a bearing on their health today, and we totally ignored it and treated them just like men. And one of my objections to women's working is, of course, I'm really big into wearing clothing that is beautiful and makes you happy. It doesn't have to be expensive at all. And what are you going to wear? If you go to work for someone, what are you going to wear? That should be one of your first priorities, because what we wear as women has a message to it, and it tells how we feel about life and what we believe, and whether we have any idea of being different from men. So before I go, I want to finish reading this man's little missive here. And I don't want to leave you on a low note, but I want you to hear this. Harm to the women. Oh, first let me read that one of the reasons a man might send a woman to work is this: a broadening experience and greater fulfillment. He'll say she needs to be more fulfilled. Well, that's just straight out of Karl Marx. Remember, he said women weren't fulfilled at home. He was the father of communism, apparently. Women weren't fulfilled at home, and they weren't paid, and it was a lot of labor just went unnoticed and everything. So now we have the modern men saying the same thing. He probably didn't even know it came from Karl Marx or some of these modernists of the early 1900s, late 1800s. You know, the Victorians fought these people. They made quite an effort to refute the things that these modernists said. And so a man might send a woman to work because he wants her to have greater fulfillment. Actually, they will say that, but really it's all about money. Because would you do this stuff for free? A broadening experience and greater fulfillment. This rationale is frequently used as justification to send a woman to work by her husband, and they feel she will be a more interesting and happy person if she leaves the confines. Remember Mrs. Bennet? When Darcy said, you don't find the country confined and unvarying, she said she was outraged. She said, confined and unvarying. And she proceeded to tell him about this great social life they had. So they use the word confines of a home. Then they say she's under house arrest. Well, I don't know how many times I've heard that. That's, you know, I've even had, you know, you'd think they'd leave you alone after a while, but even when as I'm getting more vital, there'll be somebody every now and then that will say, I suppose you live so far out in the country. Is that why you don't work? Because there's nowhere to work. There's nowhere to go. Or would you like to help me find you a job online? If you are a homemaker, you have a job, and you do benefit in many ways. And yes, you'll find that monetarily you probably do advance yourself quite a bit, and for your husband too, because a lack of expense of going out there every day. Gas is high, the wear and tear on your vehicle is expensive. Nowadays you have to make appointments for your vehicle, and you get on a payment plan for that. And there's just, and also when you're home and you can have the time to make food from the natural ingredients, you're not going to have so much money going out. So anyway, a man might justify sending his wife to work by saying she'll be happier if she leaves the confines of home and finds an outside career. They think that that's fulfillment. You know, you're more locked up away from home if you go to work. You're more locked up. You have to punch in a time card, and you stay in that facility except for your breaks, which are regulated by the government. You have to stay in that facility until it's time for you to go home. And there's no freedom there. You're certainly not going to stop and read a book when you feel like it, or sit down and have a cup of tea when you feel like it, or call a friend that's in need. You're a lot more available for other things, and especially for love and charity and comfort, and you can use your talents at home. They feel she will be a more interesting and happy person if she leaves the confines of home and find an outside career. Some feel that tending children and the monotonous duties of the household limit a woman. It's only boring if you don't know how to homeschool yourself. You don't know the joy of learning to make things, learning how the world works. Just the other day, I noticed that there was a full moon. Remember that saying, there's a full moon and madness is abroad. And of course we get the word lunatic from Luna, the moon. And I got to remembering how uneasy I was the day before. I just felt sort of just not settled and a little bit restless, and I couldn't seem to focus on any one thing. And I wondered about that, and I remembered the Eric Sloan books on the weather. Remember that one that he wrote in the 1940s on the weather? And he mentioned the moon and how it would affect certain people's moods when it was a full moon. And you don't learn about this. They quit putting it on the calendar. Remember they used to draw a picture of the different phases of the moon on your calendar? They quit doing that. And if you're at work all the time and you've got the piped in music and noise and loudspeakers and announcements all the time, and then your work is all set out for you and you have a checklist and everything, and your life is so factory-like, you're not going to notice all these things. So, but at home, you might be more sensitive to the changes in the moon and the weather and the, I don't know, I guess there's a kind of an electrical charge in the air. But because I was home, I could look it up and figure it out. That's why I felt so strange. Or you might feel strange just before it rains. You might have like an achy joint. Or you might have a little bit of a sinus, and you look around and everything seems fine, but it's going to rain. And our mothers and fathers and grandmothers, they knew all this. They knew when their knee ached or something, it was going to rain. And if you ever really want to figure it out, there's a lot of old books and shows on it, the way people used to interpret all this. But it's in the Bible too. And you know how you can discern the weather, and you know when there's going to be fair weather, and you know when there's going to be a storm. But he says here that they fear that at home they're going to be bored. You're not going to be bored with children if you learn how to teach them and take care of them yourself. If you have their best interest in heart, it's not going to be boring. They believe that she needs to get out where she can utilize her talents. You can't use your talents out there. You can use them here. Intelligence and gifts. It takes intelligence to raise little children and to look after them and to keep them safe. And gifts not only for the betterment of the world but of herself. The betterment of the world is not your responsibility. The betterment of yourself and your children and your house are, and that in a sense is the betterment of the world. Although this sounds reasonable on the surface, some fundamental principles are being ignored which cannot be disregarded without serious consequences. Harm to the woman. When a woman shares the burden of earning the living, she loses some of her femininity. She'll start sounding very clipped and practical. She will start to have the hasty, sharp replies and the business-like aura and attitude. You see it when they go to work. They change the way they dress. They change the way they approach. They're no longer interested in the lovely feminine things that they were before. I've seen many a homeschool girl off to work, and within just a very short time, she's changed so much that when Victoria magazine comes in the mail, which she used to go through and devour and look at all the tea time recipes from Tea Time magazine, now she's working and just lets it lay there, not even the least bit interested in the beauty of it, because part of her mind has been channeled in a different direction. It's like a frequency, and she's on a different frequency. Or her mother will say, "Do you want to go? To the antique stores with me today?" I mean, maybe she has a day off. No, not interested, and they lose their focus on the home. She loses some of her femininity. Notice that the emphasis is not in her working, but in earning the living. We all work. There's no argument about that. people will say, well, it's good for young people to work. Well, it's good for old people to work too. It's good for you to work. It's good for me to work. We're not arguing about working. We're arguing about where. Titus 2:5 says, keepers at home. Home is the location, and that's the safest place. It doesn't mean you can't get in your car and go get groceries or go on an outing or go somewhere else. It doesn't mean you're confined and unvarying. What I always say, kids, is just try it. Just try the keepers at home and look up some of the things on Pinterest that I have given you, where ladies go to a great deal of trouble to describe how to be happy and content as keepers at home. Just give it a try. Get as close to it as you can. So let me read some more here. In her home, she has her best opportunity to acquire true womanliness. You know, the poets who used to write, remember that was, God give us women, women of such mold, preferring ever honor unto gold, women whose homey virtues are her richest dower, who wear their beauty as a flower. You say the world needs men. God give us women, lest we lack true men. Because of the contrast between womanliness and manliness, a man is able to be more focused and driven to work at some really keen interest that he has, and that will. I know a lot of women complain because their husbands get real busy with something that they're interested in, and they don't really take time to interact with them or anything. I always felt like, well, just let's leave them alone. If they're happy doing that and it's productive and it benefits me, then I'm going to be happy with my sewing and with my meal preparation and learning new recipes. Well, just the other day, the grandson that went to Greece came back and described the food to me. So I was busy looking it up on my little phone, and he told me about a special kind of way they make hot chocolate. I figured that out, and we tried it, and he thought it was very close to it. I felt so happy. And then he talked about the pizza in Greece and Italy and the different flavors, and we looked it up, and we tried to make it exactly like that. And so if Mr. S is happy doing what he's doing, and he wants to concentrate on it, and he doesn't want me in there bothering him and wanting to watch a movie together, I'm going to just leave him alone, because he's not in my sewing room or in my space where I'm trying to cook and figure out things. He's not standing over my shoulder, and I wouldn't want him bothering me all the time if I wanted to watch a little movie or write a story or write letters to the grandkids. But I'm happy because between the two of us, we took our children away from the world, and we created a culture of our own. And we fought it. We fought the pull of the world. We fought the interference. We fought the intimidation. We even fought with a truancy officer one time. We even kicked somebody out of our house one time that was giving us a hard time over homeschooling. And goodness, I'm embarrassed because I think our kids remembered that, and they always had a little bit of extra dander because of it. That's an expression my mother taught me. She was Canadian. And they always had that little extra oomph that they could stick up for themselves if they had to and not get too passive. Well, anyway, back to my subject here. Here at home, she develops love, patience, and the feminine arts and skills. She acquires a charm that makes her distinctly different than a man. When she rejects the role for that of a man's world, she loses some of the luster which is natural to her. You know, if you watch little children play, the little girls are just naturally, sweet and feminine, and they have to be channeled into being more businesslike because they're just naturally. She takes on masculine characteristics in order to succeed in the world. Another harm is this: when a woman divides herself between two worlds, it's difficult to succeed in either. You can't choose two masters. If you feel that the work at home is not challenging enough, just make yourself a schedule and double up on the things that you can do too. And I used to have a list of 30 things. Is all your correspondence caught up? Are all your cupboards and drawers cleaned out? Have you been through your clothing lately and taken things out that need repaired? Is everything mended? Are the buttons sewn on? Have you swept under the furniture, the beds and things lately? Are your windowsills clean? Are your windows clean? Is the refrigerator clean? You just make such a long list for yourself and challenge yourself. If you don't think there's enough to do at home, you can also get lists. We used to run off lists back in the old days when the web first started. There were a lot of homemaking lists of what you had to do each month, especially in the seasonal areas, and to get you going. But some days, ladies, all I can do is get myself dressed and prepared and maybe just do the one thing, maybe clean the kitchen. And somehow other things get in the way. An errand needs to be taken. Somebody has come over. I need to stop and write a letter real quick to somebody. Or there are also other things. If the sun is shining, I've got to go out there and water the plants. And so, you know, there is so much to do. That this list that I had, if you can say, yes, I've done all this 30 times in a month, well, and I'm still bored and I still have to go to work, that might be different. But ladies, try to be content and stay close to Christ and try it. Try. Keepers means managers or workers, and home, keepers at home. Home is the base, that is the location, and you can build up your family strength through teaching your children and teaching yourself and growing in all the character qualities that you need. And I have lots of lists in here in the scriptures that I can read to you maybe next time of all the character qualities and places we can improve on. That's what makes a nation great, is the home. So, ladies, thank you so much for your patience and for coming to the end. Yay! That's what they always say after these exercise classes online. So, and I really, really appreciate your comments because they give me ideas for what I could talk about another time. So I will see you next time. Those of you that I owe letters and things I need to mail out, still working on that. That will come. And so we'll talk to you later. Bye.